guys can all hear me. Again, my name is Mo, if you don't remember me from previous Easel Lives. And today we are launching our Games Maker Challenge, which we are really, really excited about. And we're really happy everyone stuck with us through all those technical difficulties so we could get going on this. So today, obviously there's an unlimited amount of games out there for you to make, but today we're going to be making this inlaid chess checkers board. And I'm also going to show you how to make the checker pieces that go along with it. I'll show you how to make some chess pieces as well. The set I happen to make some checkers to go along with this, but I am a huge game night person, so this is going to really help me out on all my game nights and hopefully help my game skills a little bit. So the pieces that we're going to be using today, we're going to be using a 3/8" piece of bamboo and also some leopard wood, which I don't know if you guys can see the detail on these inlays that I have, but it's a really cool kind of leopard spotted wood that we use, and it's my first time actually using this wood. So let's go ahead, we'll get right into Easel and we'll show you how to make this chess and checkers board. And then after that, I'll tell you a little bit more about the game challenge and how you can enter to win, and also be able to win, or not win, but be able to get your own $20 Inventables gift card for your submission. So without further ado, let's get into Easel here. And now that we're in Easel, you can see I've got all my projects pulled up, including this one that I was working on before we got so rudely interrupted by the Internet of Things. So here we go. I've got my board here set up. Like I was saying, the material I'm going to be using today is bamboo, and it's a 3/8" thickness. For the sake of this, we also have it in a 1/2 inch that you can use as well. So the board that I have is a 12" by 12", and I will be using an 1/8" bit today. I'm going to go ahead and set it to straight cut. I would recommend using a down cut bit to cut these pieces out, just to help the wood to keep from splintering. So I'll make my design pane here a little bit bigger. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a very simple square. This square is going to be the basis for getting everything set up for our board. And I'm going to be walking through a little bit of math, a little bit of technical things for you today. I'll do my best to share as many different diagrams as I have available to kind of help explain a little bit more about what I'm doing. So my board here is a 12" by 12" board, and the number of squares that go across on a chess and checkers board is 8 by 8. So that means I've got about 64 squares and I need to fit on this area. So a size that I found that worked really well for this was 1 1/4" for each of my squares. So I got my square set up here. Now I'm going to do the inlay app now before I use a new app that we haven't introduced here yet called the Replicator app. The reason I want to use the inlay app first is because I found that this was the best way to ensure that my size pieces didn't change shape when I went to use the Replicator app. So I'm going to use the inlay generator here, and I'm going to create the inlays, which will be done in the leopard wood, and also the pockets that'll be carved out on the bamboo. So I'm going to keep this as all of the settings that I currently have. I'm using the 1/8" bit, and the tolerance is good. I'm going to go ahead and import this. I'm going to delete the other square that I had there, and I'm going to move, this will cut out my leopard wood squares for later, and I'm just going to go ahead, and for right now, I'm going to set that to a depth of 0, just so it doesn't interfere with me making my project. Now you notice that since I have to account for tolerance with these pockets, you'll notice the size of my shape now is actually 1.253 inches instead of 1.25 inches. Now this is going to be really important as we try to figure out how to arrange our squares. So there's a great app that we haven't used here on Easel Live yet called the Replicator app. And essentially what the Replicator app will do, I'll scroll down here to find it here, the one with all these smiley faces. What the Replicator app will allow me to do is tile this particular piece as many times as I want over this area. So one thing to keep in mind, and I feel like I'm just going to show this to you guys really quick. So one thing to keep in mind when you're looking at like a checkers or a chessboard is that these squares kind of line up like every other, right? So like these squares in this row line up with the squares in this row. And then there's like an offset for these squares to line up on the offset. So what's really important to know about that is that to use the Replicator app correctly, we're actually going to make 2 different sets of squares and then sort of place them on top of each other to create this checkerboarding pattern. So I'll show you how I do that in Easel here, just so we can be all on the same page about everything. So while I am, what I've found was really easiest was using the Replicator app, which is down here with the smiley faces. And I went ahead and I did a 4x4. And this is the part that I got a little bit hung up on in my mind, trying to figure out the spacing that I should put between these squares. Because as you remember, when I'm looking at the chess and checkers board, I have to leave enough gap for the white squares, which is not really a square, it's just the back of the bamboo. Only the leopard wood is inlaid in this. And the bamboo part is just a part of my original piece of wood. So I need to account for a 1.253-inch square here as well. Now the other thing that's tricky about inlay is that I do need to leave a little bit of gap between these pieces in order to make sure that my inlays are going to fit snugly and that I don't get off or that they don't fit correctly. So what I have to do is account for a little bit of a distance on both the top and side of each of these inlay squares to make sure that the inlays are going to fit properly. So I will admit that I'm not the best person at math, especially when it comes to this kind of spatial math. It's a little bit difficult for me to wrap my head around. But what I decided to do was to add 0.1 inches of my square. So I drew up this little diagram. I don't know if it's going to help you guys at all, but essentially these are the squares. These 4 squares are going to be the squares I make in the Replicator app. And then this square is going to be the one that I kind of inlay as my second pasted object. So I need to account for 0.1 inches on either side of these squares, which means the total distance from this square to my next square in the Replicator app is actually 1.453 inches between my squares. And you can see I just kind of wrote this over here that my sides of my square plus 2 times the spacing, so I have space on either side, gives me this distance between my 2 squares in the Replicator app. So if I go back into Easel, I'll show you what that looks like in the app. So for this spacing here, this spacing dictates how much space I have between these components. So you can see if I set this to 1 inch, the spacing increases between all these elements. If I set it to 4 inches, there's even more space between them. If you remember, the number that I want to do is the 1.453 inches between my squares. So let's go ahead and let's import those in. All right, so now I've got that done. I don't need this piece anymore, but I'll keep it over here just in case I need to redo something. So I'll go ahead and set that to 0 so it doesn't affect my carves. Now I'm going to lay another set of these squares on top of it, but offset a little bit to account for the squares that are supposed to go on these in-between pieces. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to change the position of all these squares so that the bottom left-hand corner here is in the 0, 0 mark on my material board here. Now that I've got that done, I'm going to select all my squares. I'm going to go up here to File, Copy, and then I'm going to paste these squares again. So you can see when I lay these on that they will make that checkerboard pattern. Now, it's important to know that I want to make sure that these squares line up exactly where I want them to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset the bottom left corner of this square down here 0.1 inches off of the edge of this square, since that's the distance I accounted for between my pieces. So I'm going to set my X and Y position to 0.1353. And that will position this bottom left square and, as a result, all the other squares into the correct place. So you can see now I've generated my checkerboard pattern. But you'll see over here in the preview, it's not exactly where I want it to be when I carve it out. So I'm going to select all of these pieces again. And now I'm going to change my position of the center of all these squares. I'm going to change my position to 6 and 6. This way, I'm completely centered in a 12 by 12 board, which is exactly what I want to be able to do. Now, the other thing you'll notice if you're looking over here in the preview pane, that I don't want to cut my inlays this deep. In fact, when you are cutting inlays, you only want to cut your inlay as deep as the thickness of your inlay that you're going to use. So this is the leopard wood that I was talking about before, and I want to cut my inlay pockets as thick as this piece of material. So this is a 6-inch by 12-inch piece of leopard wood that's a 1/16 of an inch thick. Got my handy dandy calipers just to make sure that that's actually the thickness that it's going to be. And it does look like, if I zero it out correctly, it looks like my actual thickness is close to about 0.065. So I'm going to go back into Easel, and I'm going to set the depth of my pockets to 0.065. Cool. So now I've got my pockets at the correct depth to be able to accept these inlays. So that is the first part of my board that I'm going to do. Now, to make things even easier, I've already got my little square over here that I'm going to be using to make my leopard wood cutouts. So let's go ahead, and I'm just going to duplicate this piece here, this work piece down here, and just go ahead and clear this all out and bring my square back in. So let's go ahead. I'm going to change this up just so I have this set for my leopard wood. Leopard wood, unfortunately, is not one of the materials that's listed in here, but it does have a similar hardness to Babinga. So I'm going to set that as my thickness. I'm still going to be using an 1/8 inch bit, and the material size, as I was saying, is a 6 by 12, and as we know, the thickness is the 0.65. All right, so I've got one of my squares here, and in order to have enough for the checkerboard, I need to be able to produce 32 of these squares. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to get 32 squares on this 6 by 12. So what I found was easiest was actually just using copy paste. And I just went ahead and I made enough of these to fit on so that I have to only carve 2 pieces of the leopard wood in order to get enough of these done. All right, so let's get these guys over. So what I did, just to be on the safe side, I actually carved out a few extras of these inlays since you know, I don't like to have a lot of scrap material. I figured this was a good way to make sure that I had the right number of inlay pieces, just in case one of them didn't cut out correctly or something went wrong in the process. I also am not going to use tabs on any of these cuts. I found that with really thin materials like this, especially something that's a 1/16 of an inch, it's really hard to use tabs and have them come out correctly. So I would suggest using double-sided tape and just making sure the strips go across the back of these pieces where they're going to be on your board, and you'll be able to do that. So this piece, you'll see this is also not 32 squares, but I will be able to carve this out twice, and that'll give me the right files. So those are my 2 pieces that I have to make my inlay cutting board. And you'll see that as much as fun as to have a board, it's more fun when you can actually play on it. So I'm going to open up another work piece here, and I'm going to go ahead and make this. Oh, one last thing I wanted to mention. You'll notice that the cuts on these are set to on path. Since we use the inlay app, I would recommend not changing this to an outside path. If you change it to an outside path, we're actually going to undo the work that we did by using the inlay app. So it's really important to make sure that you set these to being on path and not on outside. So just go ahead and leave these shapes as they were when they were generated in the inlay app. All right, so we'll go back here now. Now we're going to make our checker pieces. You'll remember that the size of the square that I had for all the pieces was 1.25 inches, and I'm going to want my circles to be a little bit smaller than that. So for this, I found a good size was actually 1.1 inches. and I'll use this lock feature to change both of the dimensions at the same time. And I'm also going to set this to an outside shape, since that's going to be what I end up using. I want the full inside shape of this, that full 1.1 inches, to be used for my checkerboard piece. The material that I used on my two little discs was, I actually used a bamboo for both of these pieces, and I ended up just staining one of them darker. I was a little bit disappointed to see that we don't sell the leopard wood in a 1/4 inch, and that was what I wanted to use for these pieces, to make sure they had a good heft to them for when you're picking them up and playing them on the board. So I used a darker stain, but I cut them out of the same piece of bamboo, which actually worked out really well because we do sell an 8x12 sheet of bamboo in this thickness, in the 1/4 inch thickness, and that worked out really nicely for being able to use it in a Carvey or in an X-Carve. And then I just took half of my chips and I just went ahead and stained this one the dark color, and then just used the natural mineral oil on this one, and they turned out really nice. And I think they actually complement each other well. They're like the same piece, so it's a little more coordinated that way. So I'll get back in Easel and I'll show you what I was doing there. So pull this open, and so I want to make sure these cut all the way through. I'll first go ahead and change my material thickness to the right one here, and this was an 8x12. And we're using the bamboo. All right, so went ahead and have this cut all the way through. If you'd like to use tabs on this, you can. I find that with this kind of thickness and shape, I didn't need to use 4 tabs. I just used the 2 tabs to hold it in place while it carved. And the most important thing about checkers is, if you're playing the game correctly, you should hopefully get kinged, which means you make it all the way across the checkers board, and then you start coming back and picking up your opponent's pieces. So I just used this little pen tool to draw a quick little crown design in Easel. And I'll just draw one up here now as well. All right, that should do it. It's not perfect, but you know, adds a little character. And then I will just go ahead and place this inside here. And I'm gonna set it to an inside cut. All right. So there's my little checkers piece. I'll select both these shapes, just make sure that my crown aligns in the center of it. And then I can just go ahead and select these 2 pieces. And again, I can use copy and paste. The reason I don't use the Replicator app for this is it has a hard time understanding 2 pieces that are together. So copy and paste is probably gonna be your best bet in terms of getting a good replication of these pieces. The one nice thing that I can do is I can just go ahead and line them all up, and then just go ahead and make copies of the whole row that I can then carve out. So in order to do this correctly, you're going to need 24 pieces total. Each player has 12 pieces, and you should be able to just, sometimes it's nice to have extras. I don't know about you guys, but I'm always losing things, and so any game that has a lot of little pieces is not so great for me to have. So carve a few extra just to make sure that you're safe. And there you go. You've got a full checkers set. Now, just for fun, since the nice thing about the checkers board is you can also use it to play chess, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to make a chess piece really quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and import an image of some chess pieces that I found online. So I'll go here, I'll upload a file, and let's see, it's going to be this one. You can see I found this image with a lot of cool little chess pieces, and I'm going to import this into Easel. I've got the full set here now, and everything looks really good here. The pieces I'm most concerned about are these ones down here. These are going to be the ones that I want to be able to use in my pieces, because it'll be a really good way to get a better outline. These ones aren't going to work out so well since they've got some weird carving paths, and that's not going to work so well with the Interlocker app, which is what I'm going to use to make the chess pieces. So I'm going to stick with using these ones down here. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to import these in, and once I got everything in here, I'm just going to go ahead and delete these guys and focus on just using these pieces down here. So as much as I'd love to show you how to make all of these, I'm going to stick with just using the pawn for right now. So again, since my my checkerboard pieces are 1.25 inches, I'm going to change the width of this shape to be 1.1 inches, the same as the other piece that I had done for the checker, so that the base of the shape here is that 1.1 inches. You can see that's the widest part of the shape, so that should be the dimension that the size takes into place. So now I got that open. I'm going to go ahead and set it to an outline and an outside cut. Again, I want to make sure I get the full width of that piece, and as you can see in the simulate feature here, that's going to allow me to have that full width when I have it set to outside. So now that I've got that, I'll go ahead and get into my apps here, and I'll find the Interlocker app. So the Interlocker app, again, it's really important to make sure when you're doing this that your notch size is exactly the same thickness as your material. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and use an 1/8 inch piece of material. The piece of material I measured was slightly larger than that, so I'm going to go ahead and set this to 0.128 inches, since the piece of material that I have is a little bit thicker than a 1/4 inch, sorry, an 1/8 inch, since 1/8 inch is going to be the piece of material I'm using. And my bit size, I'm also going to be using an 1/8 inch. So I'll make sure that does it correctly. Slot position, in this case, it's actually perfect. It's right in the middle of the pawn, but if I needed to move the slot to one side or another, which I found I had to do with the knight, I can use that as well. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and keep it right in the middle. All right, so now I can go ahead and import this, and I can get rid of this shape. But for now, I think I'll just set it to mask it for now. And now you can see I've got my little pawn pieces. So I can go ahead and carve these out and be able to use that. I want to make sure before I do this, since I'm using an 1/8 inch piece of material. Oops, oops, oops. Make sure my slider is less than that, and then I'll go in and change it to an 1/8 inch. All right. Got that all set up. And now I'll make sure these cut through. I would recommend using tabs to cut these little pieces out, just because it's probably the better way to make sure these are kind of detailed for their size. So I would go ahead and use tabs. Again, you could probably get away with just using 2 tabs. Just make sure the tab doesn't fall inside the interlocking piece. That's going to be kind of messy to clean up. So I just move it to the outside and make sure it's in a spot that's going to be easier to remove. So I'm not going to show you how to make the rest of the chess pieces, but you can see they're all here in the file. And if you visit my Easel project, you'll be able to do that as well. I've got the pieces in there for you. So if I go into Easel here, or I go to our website, I go into projects, you can see I have now added Galore Easel Live in here. You can always access this Easel Live video after we post it and save it. So if I go in here, I can open up the Easel project that I just worked on, and it shows you the list of materials of everything that we used here today to make the checkers set. And if I open this up in Easel, I added some little notes in here because I thought it might be helpful for people. But if I use this particular Easel set, I've got a bunch of different work pieces down here, but you can see on the side here, I added those chess pieces that I was talking about. So you should be able to open these up and use those if you wanted to use the Interlocker app to make the chess pieces. All right, so let's talk about something a little more exciting, which is how you can earn $20 for building your own game. So if I go to the main website here, you can see we've got this great big header for maker challenges, and let's go ahead and check those out. So we have launched the Games Maker Challenge, which is live on our site right now. This Maker Challenge will be going through the end of June, so make sure your submissions are in before midnight Central Standard Time on at the end of June. And you can go ahead, if you'd like to view the official rules, there's a really quick, easy way to do that here. And if you want to view some of the entries and submit your own, you can do that in here as well. So when you go to submit your entry, go ahead and click this button. Your photo must be a carved picture of your game. Unfortunately, for this particular Maker Challenge, we do require that your projects are carved, which means an Easel file is not going to be enough to be able to earn that $20 Inventables gift card. So you do need to carve out your game or your game element in order to receive that Inventables gift card. So upload a photo here, type in a quick submission or description. And then for this part, you're gonna wanna copy and paste only the last part of your Easel URL. So just keep the part that comes after the project section, and you'll be able to just copy and paste that into here. And that'll be how you can add your game to our submissions. All of the gift cards that we're going to be issuing will be issued at the end of, after the end of June. So we're hoping to do that in the first week of July. And we'll send the gift card to the email address that's associated with your Inventables account. Now, you might be thinking like, well, you know, I don't really know what to make. And, you know, that's understandable. But there really are not a lot of other limitations to this particular Maker Challenge. So if you have, maybe you have like a favorite card game that you like, or you have just like a deck of cards that you like, you can still make an accessory or an element that goes along with that game, and that can count as your carved project. This is an awesome box that one of our customers made us. You can see it's got this really nice engraving on it with a V-bit actually, which is beautiful. It's got a really nice finish, a cool little hinge. And then on the inside, we've got our deck of cards, and we've also got these really cool poker chips that were made with our Laserable colored acrylic, which is a little bit nicer material than the HDPE. It also is a little bit thinner, but you can still get that 2 coloration, which is really cool. So we've got those in there to play, you know, whenever we feel like playing cards around the office, or, you know, I would lose a lot of money if I ever tried to play any kind of poker. So this would also count as a game submission, is any kind of carrying case or accessory. Another thing to note is if you have a game that you really like to play, let's say like a board game that you like to play, you don't need to carve out all the little tokens and all the little dice or anything that might go along with that. Or if it's a card game, you don't need to carve out the cards to go along with it either. So you can carve an element that might enhance a game that you already have or help make that game a little bit better, and that would also count as a submission. These are also really cool, speaking of card games. These are little stick cards, so they're a little bit, they're smaller than normal cards, but they're great for travel. You can just keep them in your car or keep them in your suitcase, and they travel well, and you can play games, you can play card games this way with just these little stick cards. So this is a cool idea that we found on Pinterest that my friend Sam carved up for us, and it's a nicer set than what you could just make with a standard popsicle stick. So these are cool little travel cards. We've also got this really great Tic-Tac-Toe Corian board that one of our partners made for us, and it's using quarters to do tic-tac-toe. So you can do heads and tails for your indication of, you know, X's and O's, and you can just use tic-tac-toe to play it on this way. And I personally just really like the design of this with the Corian. It's really well done. This has like a really good heft to it. So that's a cool little case that you can keep on your desk when you have friends over. And if you remember from my previous Easel Live, I was really into Dominoes, so I wanted to bring back the domino box game that I made. And this would also count as a game submission. Not only did I make the box to hold the dominoes, but I also made the dominoes themselves out of some black MDF and my mask, my paint mask that I could then paint the little dots on. So this would also count as a game submission. There really isn't a lot of limitation to what kind of games there are out there in the world. We'd love to see what you guys are interested in playing and what kind of things you make to accompany the games that you have. So feel free, you got all the month of June to go ahead and get carving and add something to our games challenge. If you have any questions, I would check out the FAQ on that to learn all the fine rules and the fine details of that. But other than that, we hope everyone gets their game on and has some really awesome game nights planned so that, you know, summer's coming. It's a good time to get the games going. If you have any questions about this Easel Live, I really apologize for some of the technical difficulties we were having earlier, but thank you for sticking with us. My name is Mo. You can always reach out to us at help@inventables.com, and we hope that we see your submission soon. Thanks for joining us.